Good morning, Dr. McBride. This is Kenny Tucker, and I am presenting my final project proposal. It is titled The Impact of One-to-One Technology and USA Test Prep on Student Academic Performance as measured by the U.S. History EOC Georgia Milestones Assessment. So I'll start with the abstract summary. The findings in my summary include the fact that one-to-one technology has significantly changed education in the past 2 decades. This was brought out in the research and something that I wanted to highlight as a continuity evolving in education. Also, prior research concludes that one-to-one technology usage has resulted in gains in student achievement on standardized tests. I thought this was an interesting finding and something that relates to the study directly in the fact that one-to-one technology has been proven through research to increase student achievement on standardized tests. Also, gaps in the research do exist. The first is that regarding the impact of one-to-one technology, equity and access for low SES populations is definitely a concern. So for those low socioeconomic groups, there definitely needs to be some closing of the gaps in that regard. And finally, another gap in the research states that the impact of one-to-one programs on standardized test performance using specific interventions such as USA Test Prep has yet to be determined. So we do need to close the gap there, which is another reason for my particular proposal. So with that being said, my research problem states that a class digital divide exists between the wealthy and the poor, making equity and access a critical challenge for Georgia school administrators. Effective technology interventions and teaching pedagogy are needed to facilitate higher academic performance on the EOC milestones in order to help students fulfill graduation requirements and to ensure college and career readiness. The impact of USA Test Prep as an effective intervention tool has not been widely investigated and therefore is the subject of my proposed study. One of the major indicators for schools in Georgia is the CCRPI index, which is college career readiness performance. And so, one of the measures is how are we increasing gains on standardized tests with certain subgroups. So I thought that was an important part of this research topic. That being said, here are my 3 research questions. Number 1, what is the relationship between student achievement and U.S. history as measured by Georgia EOC milestones assessment data and the use of one-to-one technology, specifically USA Test Prep as an intervention tool? Second question reads, what is the difference in African American student achievement in U.S. history as measured by Georgia EOC milestones assessment data and the use of one-to-one technology, specifically USA Test Prep as an intervention tool? And my final question reads, what are the differences in how teachers actually utilize USA Test Prep as an intervention to improve student performance on the Georgia U.S. History EOC milestones? So we'll move to the literature review findings. There were several findings that came out as I reviewed the literature. It was a quite fluid review in that I found some trends that actually determined that there was a change over time in 2 decades leading up to where we are now regarding one-to-one technology in the classroom. So the first major finding is that the constructivist nature of one-to-one laptop programs, which includes cooperative and independent learning, increased technology proficiency and creative exploration, leads to active student engagement and higher academic achievement. So basically what that's saying is that with one-to-one laptops, the justification wraps around back to the fact that the learning is constructivist in nature. Students are learning in a more independent manner. The teacher is more so becoming the facilitator, so that's a positive. The second major finding is that There are primary concerns, including access to technology for low SES groups, student use of laptops, such as gaming, surfing, and social networking, and teacher pedagogy. So essentially, how are teachers teaching using one-to-one laptops, and what are students actually doing with their one-to-one laptops? So there's definitely some gaps that we need to close there regarding this use of laptops. Researchers suggested longitudinal empirical studies to generate possible solutions to these problems. And then the last major takeaway here is that longitudinal studies in the early 2000s found, among other things, that students with school-issued laptops achieved higher than their non-laptop counterparts. So that was an interesting finding, but nonetheless not surprising. And then gaps in alignment with national technology curriculum frameworks and pedagogical and administrative management techniques need to be investigated. And so again, investigations in recent years have focused on the impact of one-to-one technology programs on specific subgroups, the teaching and learning process, and the impact on standardized test scores. So this kind of wraps around to the other findings in the lit review. And so in the early 2000s going up until 2015, 2016, we're kind of like focusing more on the actual impact of those programs on specific subgroups, as well as the pedagogy and that connection to higher student achievement on standardized tests. So let's move to my proposed research study, which encapsulates all of what we've learned in the research literature review process. And so I want to talk about the methodology. So I wanted to use a quantitative study. I wanted to also have a control and experimental group selected through convenience sampling. Of course, the target school will have a certain number of students. I believe I estimated about 350 to 400 students. And those students would be selected through convenience sampling. The dependent variable would be the Georgia U.S. History EOC milestones scores, the results of those, of that test that would be taken in the spring. And then the independent variable would be the experimental group's usage of USA testPrep programs with one-to-one laptops. The control group would not actually use USA testPrep. They would use other traditional methods of learning. They would still use one-to-one technology, but they just would not be using USA testPrep throughout the year leading up to the exam. The study design is as follows. I wanted to use a post-test only control group design. Again, you know, with the milestones, there really is no pretest for it. And so to minimize internal threats to validity, I just want to use the post-test only design. I think that would be the most appropriate way to approach this research study. Also, statistical comparisons of both groups on the U.S. History EOC milestones using an analysis of variance tests. That would give us a nice mean for both groups, and we'd be able to compare the data from there. And then also a categorical multiple choice survey given to the participating teachers, asking them questions such as how did they actually use the USA Test program? How often did they use it? You know, did their students have access to technology away from the classroom where they could complete homework assignments on USA testPrep? Those types of questions, which are attached to the proposal, would be asked to those teachers. And then finally, I wanted to definitely highlight some limitations. This is not a perfect proposal, as is any proposal. They all have limitations. So here are my limitations. Number one, the level of teacher training, familiarity, and pedagogy using USA testPrep. One teacher may not have the same level of training or understanding of USA testPrep and how it works compared to another teacher. And so that definitely is a limitation. Differential selection due to differences in student learning motivation. All students are not created the same, and they don't come in with the same motivation for learning. So there may be some differences in those two groups, the experimental and control group, in terms of student motivation. And then finally, differential attrition due to student absenteeism and student withdrawals. If we have students drop out before the end of the study. If we have students who have a high absentee rate and there's a difference in those two groups, then that's going to be a limitation to the study. It may skew that information. Of course, we also have to look at the ethical considerations. So with this proposed study, I do not anticipate that any participant will be harmed during the process. Try to ensure this by obtaining prior written consent for all participants, both teachers and students. All participants will understand the design and the purpose of the study prior to the study coming underway. I am going to, in the proposal, you'll see that I'll be going to the open house and talking with parents, and I'll be putting out information through the website, the school's website, writing letters, etc., to help them understand what the study is for, and also to obtain their consent. Required forms will be submitted for approval to the Columbus State University IRB, the Institutional Review Board. So that way everything is clear and there's an understanding of how I'm actually going to approach this proposal. How the study will inform future research. So this study will inform teachers and administrators about the potential benefits of using one-to-one technology and USA testPrep as an intervention for teaching and learning. Also, hopefully there will be improved student performance on the U.S. History EOC milestones, which will help close the CCRP gap, especially in schools with low socioeconomic student populations. And also, leaders can utilize the results of this study to increase graduation rates, which is always a topic of concern, and to make sound instructional decisions for teachers and students. So this concludes a presentation of my proposal. Hopefully you enjoyed the presentation and also will enjoy the reading of my actual proposal. And I thank you for everything that you've helped us learn throughout this 7 weeks. Have a good afternoon. Bye.